In Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, we see the ghost of Christmases to come. Scrooge sees his own grave. Well, sorry to have to say it, but I'm the ghost of football yet to come. And football is dying, and soon it will be dead. The football is a game of skill, wit, imagination at its greatest. That was why it was called the beautiful game. The beautiful game was people doing awesome things with the ball, great skills, dribbling, passing, movement, and doing things that they learned on the street. Basically, that they taught themselves. Because if you were little, you needed a trick to get round the big guy, or a number of tricks to survive. And people learnt those things, and they used their own imagination. And imagination and wit in soccer would always be much more potent than power and athleticism. That's why it was such a great game. Now, people in Western Europe don't play on the streets anymore. They don't play improvised football anymore. Wherever they go, there's a coach, a teacher, and an organizer, a setup. And in that setup, when you break the rules, which all the great players do, you cause a problem. And someone says, hold on a minute, you can't do that. And you can't do that because the team ethos is more important than the individual skills. And that's the cart before the horse. It's the wrong way round. And even if kids didn't have their computers, their Game Boys, and their toys, and the comforts of their home, they still wouldn't be able to go out in the street and play in an improvised way. So the only players that are really thrilling people in the world now, the few: Ronaldinho from Brazil, poor. Lionel Messi from Argentina, poor background, the same background Maradona came from. And if you can think of Italy winning the World Cup and the most important player being their centre-half and captain, Cannavaro, without one outstanding forward in the team, not one outstanding forward, then you realise how impoverished football is. If you think about Britain, Ireland, take Scotland for a start, haven't got one single player that you'd pay money to see. Scotland, Jimmy Johnston in history, Kenny Dalglish, Graham Souness, Jim Baxter, Paddy Crerand, all great, imaginative, gifted, one-off players, legends in the game now because there's so few players. And if you think of Northern Ireland, you know, George Best, where's George Best? Danny Blanchflower, you know, Pat Jennings. Well, Pat Jennings is a goalkeeper. Okay, goalkeepers, even the goalkeepers aren't as good these days, but goalkeepers, I don't know. But Danny Blanchflower and George Best, two of the greatest imaginative players ever to come out of it. If you think of Ireland, Paul McGrath, Liam Brady, John Giles, Ronnie Whelan, great players who were like no other players and who enriched the spectacle of football. And no players coming from here either. We have Robbie Keane and Damien Duff. Duff isn't the real deal, and Robbie Keane is a terrific young guy. He's going to break all the goal scoring records, and he has got originality and talent. The one exception to the rule, England have just a lot of zombies really, with one exception, Wayne Rooney, who's from a poor working class area of Liverpool, always on the streets, always playing. But that's very, very rare. Now, if you take that element away, the street game, then you take the source of all that's beautiful about soccer away as well. Because in the street, you learn to do it your way. And all the great players do it their way. Now, you can't mass produce footballers, and that's what they're trying to do now. It's like a factory production line. They all do the same. I watched England schoolboys play Scotland schoolboys a few weeks ago. It was scary. There wasn't one player on the pitch who's going to make a good professional. What you had was 22 kids, all of whom were strong, most of whom were very quick, and they were all diggers. It was like watching paint dry. It was terrible. It was shocking. No little guy who could do imaginative things. There's no place for guys in a game like that. I watched Sheffield United and Watford. It must have been one of the worst games in Premiership history. And the only two players on the pitch who tried to play football were playing for Sheffield United. Alan Quinn, who's an Irish kid, and Keith Gillespie from the North, who's a little tricky winger. Now, they're old-fashioned yesterday. Watford wouldn't even want players like that. Happily, Sheffield United won the match. But in Europe now, there are 600 Brazilians playing professional soccer outside of Brazil. In the Champions League clubs, 150 of their players are Brazilians. Why? Because that's where mass poverty is. That's where you have the hunger. That's where you don't have the structures and the organisation to have coaches all over the place. Coaches are killing the game. And the other big factor in all of this is when you have organised competitive football for very young boys, 9, 10, they have to have a coach and they have to have a football club. As soon as you have a club and a coach, what's the next thing? You have to win. Because, why? Because the coach's ego's on the line. Or maybe two coaches' egos on the line. So you're under 9. Now, what do you want if you want to win? You want to be effective. So you don't want a little guy who's doing tricks and giving the ball away. What you want is a big, strong guy who will push the little guy out of the way or kick him out of the way. And that's the way this cancer, really, has eaten into the core of soccer, the core resource, which is wit, imagination and skill. Wit, imagination and skill can't be controlled. And a coach wants, as a first objective, to control the elements that he's working with. So you end up with no real talent. And there's a talent deficit now that will change football from being the beautiful game to being the awesome game. Awesome in the sense of Michael Essien, who's awesome, or Claude Makélélé, and it'll be, or Cannavaro. Those will be the players that coaches look for. And you get there's a lot of poverty and hunger in Africa, and you got a lot of players now coming out of Africa. They're not like, they're powerful lads, but they don't have the street skills, oddly enough. They don't belong to the classic football cultures of South America and Europe. So now you see the great tournaments being won by Greece. Greece didn't have a player in the team, except a lot of very accomplished and professional players, but no Ronaldinho, no Wayne Rooney. And you have the World Cup won essentially by Italy, whose strengths were powerful defence, a couple of big lads up front, and don't give anything away in midfield. So the Premiership reflects this. You see a lot of matches where there's so much energy expended, but you see very little that's original, that's engaging, and it makes you feel, you know. So in 20 years' time, in 10 years' time, the picture will be very bleak. It'll be football as we've known it in these islands and in this country will be over. There will be no real, engaging, brilliant talent. It's gone. Scotland haven't produced a player for 20 years. Not one. Scotland is the home of great players. We haven't produced a great player for a very long time. Roy Keane, yes, but Roy Keane was great in the modern day sense of being great. Where's the Bobby Charlton? You know, no Bobby Charlton. There's never going to be another Bobby Charlton. There's never going to be another Liam Brady. That's my case.